Hello and welcome back to the SporeSwaps Podcast. It's been a while, guys. It's been like 3 months, but here we are.
We're
We're
here.
back, and we're excited to hang out. We're excited
Yeah.
to be with you guys today, and we got this crazy role reversal podcast going on tonight. So this is a podcaster interviewing a podcaster.
Yes. We're
Um,
swapping podcasts, swapping genetics.
Yeah, for sure. So this is KK. KK has her own podcast that's called the Flora Funga Podcast. Um, super interesting material. She's been doing some really great things in the community, connecting with some super influential people, super interesting guests. And I gotta say, I'm kind of a fan. I look up to you in a little bit.
Oh, thank you.
One day, maybe I'll have my own Flora Funga podcast. But for now, we're on the SporeSwaps podcast. I'm Controlled Chaos Genetics. Thanks for being here today. How you doing, KK?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. You've already cheered me up, got me in a good mood. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so we always try to start by just talking about you. We want to make this podcast about you. So why don't you do me the great pleasure of telling me about where your journey started, um, how you got into biology, how you got into plants,
Mm-hmm.
and how that graduated into a love for fungi and the study of microsymbiotics and the connection of plants and fungus to people. Tell me
Yes.
about it all. Where
Yes.
were where did this all start?
Okay. Well, I woke up. No, I feel like a lot of people kind of grow up maybe with gardening and just kind of being outside, enjoying climbing trees, just like being out in nature, going on walks. My mom was a huge fan of gardening, so I would have our own like family gardens that we'd do, plant some lupines, all of these fun little plants, native plants, and stuff like that. So I always loved nature. I always loved climbing trees. And I decided to go to college for something, but I started with going as biochemistry. I don't know why. That sounds like maybe the worst or the hardest major to kind of pick. But one of my prerequisites was plant science. And first of all, my professor was amazing. He just was fun energy, kind of explained everything um, with good detail, really enjoyable professor to have. And it just came really naturally to me that class that I took was really fun. I saw that so I went to Mankato in Minnesota for college, and I saw that outside that there was a greenhouse, and I was like, someday, somehow, I'm gonna get into that greenhouse. And so when I saw my plant science class, I figured out that I could get into that greenhouse. So that's kind of where it all stemmed from. I was just like, I wonder what's in there. I love greenhouses, walking around when I was younger. I actually got in trouble from my mom because I would go to my neighbor's house and pick all of their tulips, and I just like was so pretty, and she was like, you got to go back there. You got to go back and apologize that you like flicked all of their tulips. And I was like, okay, let's do that. So yeah, walking around greenhouses, collecting all of the little succulent leaves that you find, because each succulent leaf actually grows a whole new succulent plant. So I just kind of learned how you can grow your own from just like this little leaf. And so yeah, that's really where it stemmed from, just kind of being out in nature. But yeah, definitely changed my major from biochemistry to plant biology or plant science. So that's really how I got into plants. And then really realized quickly how connected plants and fungi really are. My mom actually gifted me. I'm a book nerd, so I have all these books behind me. I love reading. My mom tells me the story when I was 5 years old. She gave me a book, and I opened it and just would like kiss it. And I was just like, that's so weird. But like, I was just like super into books, I guess. So yeah, I got this book. Maybe some of you know, called Mycelium Running by Paul Stamets. And that was a
Yep.
book that kind of started a lot of people, I think, into mushrooms, mycology, cultivating your own, psychedelics, things like that. So I I read it all. I read the whole book, loved the book, and I had this amazing opportunity to travel abroad for college for a semester or for a month in New Zealand. And to get a credit there, I had to teach some class of some sort. And so I wanted to bring this book and actually do a whole class on like the importance of fungi and mushrooms. And everybody was, kind of weirded out about it, but New Zealand, if you don't know, is amazing for biodiversity. Since it's an island, you're getting all these spores from all over the world. So the diversity there is not really like any other place. You got Australia a little bit, but yeah, New Zealand's just perfect. Got tons of tropicals, volcanoes, mountains, things like that. So yeah, I led a whole class with the importance of fungi, and I got everybody interested in mushrooms, and it was really fun. And I really realized how my passion could have an effect on people. And so every time we would go on our little like bush walks, they'd always be like, "KK, you got to get to the front of the line. You got to check out this mushroom. Like, look what we found." So I actually got like all of these people just when we were walking around collecting seeds and planting stuff and killing the invasive plants. They're like, "But you got to check out this mushroom." And I was like, "Yes, we're getting everybody in on this." So that's really what stemmed from that too. I also saw my first mushroom on my grandparents' property in Wisconsin, and I saw the Amanita muscaria, and a lot of people would know, what that one is, which is the white and red, Mario mushroom or whatever the toadstool is that you would call it. And so, yeah, I was just like, this is such an interesting mushroom. How does this happen? Took some pictures with it, and that's really what stemmed my love for mushrooms and learning. I just wanted to learn how they communicate. Back then, actually, 5-10 years ago, when I first learned about mushrooms, they didn't really come out with any studies on how they communicated. So I was like, that's so interesting. There's so much to learn, so much to discover in mycology. And yeah, that's really what stemmed my love for plants and fungi. You can't really have one without the other. It's all kind of intertwined. So
For
that's
sure,
that's where
for
that all
sure.
stem from.
Some of the best
Mhm.
advice that I can give people who are trying to take on the hobby of foraging is to, if you want to know where mushrooms are growing or specific types of mushrooms are growing, you got to study trees because it's
Yep.
all relative. So,
Mhm. Yep.
if you can find a certain type of tree from a distance, there is a good likelihood that given that type of season, year, temperature, etc., that you'll find a specific type of mushroom growing around or at the bottom of that tree. So, yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely
Yep.
love that.
Mhm.
So, when your mom got you into plants
Mhm.
and gardening, was this more uh, like floral and succulent type of gardening, or was this gardening for the use of food, like kind of
Yeah,
thing?
mostly the use of food. Definitely, tomatoes, and we would build our own like wooden gardening slots, like raised beds, I guess is what you'd call them. So yeah, we would
Yeah,
just kind of grow our tomatoes. My grandparents kind of did the same thing. So every time I visit them, I was like, yes, we get to like harvest all the food that we planted, carrots, beans, all the usual types of things, sunflowers. But my mom obviously loves pretty stuff too. So we would have peonies, we would have the lupines. So we would always kind of get some bulbs, and I would help her plant hostas and crocus. And everybody's excited for the springtime. This was when I was living in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So, you go through the full winter and then you're like, oh, when can I see green again? When can I smell these flowers? So, yeah, we would spend kind of the fall planting some of these bulbs in hopes of it coming up in the spring. And it always did. So it was great.
okay.
It was very rewarding.
So that's the second time you mentioned lupines. What are lupines? So I don't know that plant.
Lupines, uh, lupines are a really pretty flower, perennial, I guess you'd say. But yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those plants. You were asking edibles, but so I just wanted to list off a few, just like plants, shrubs, perennials. I wouldn't know all the scientific names, so don't come for me.
Gotcha, gotcha.
Hmm.
Um, so And you have now transferred that also into your, like, your main gig too, right? Um, you work
Mm.
for a mushroom farm?
Yes, yeah, so when I moved here to Florida, there's a farmer's market where my mom was in the Villages, and so when my mom was walking around that farmer's market, she saw that there was a mushroom stand, and so this is Zephyr Gill's mushroom farm, and my mom actually went up to him and she was like, "Hey, so I have this daughter, and I think she's gonna come work for you." And he was just like, "Oh, okay, that's random." And so whenever I did move down there, I met up with him, and it was a really he's a really fun guy, no pun intended. But yeah, so that's Eric. He's been doing his mushroom farm for about 4 years now too. So actually, kind of the same amount of time that I've had the podcast. I think mine's 5 years, 4 years. And yeah, so I met with him and I was like, I would definitely come help out. So yeah, I kind of help out with like the outreach, the farmers market stuff, social media, those things. So he's like the mushroom farmer, per se, and I'm kind of like the people person is what I like to say, because he's like, I love just like getting my hands dirty, doing the hard work, and I'm like, well, I can help you kind of branch out into other markets. So yeah, that's kind of where it stemmed from. Is um, my mom's just so funny. She's like, "Yeah, I got a daughter, super into mushrooms. She's gonna move here shortly, so I think she might work for you." And he was just like, "Okay, let's see that."
Hey, you gotta you gotta manifest your success, right? I mean, sure.
Yeah.
She she did it for you. I mean, she knows what
She's
you
the
like.
best. She's the best. I feel like she's got me so many, job opportunities just because she's my biggest fan is what I like to say. And she's just like even more of like that outreach that I like to say. She's just such a people person. So yeah. Thank you, mom.
Gotta love your mom. I mean,
Yeah.
so in the same regard too, like, this is not the most main like chasing your dreams in terms of cultivating fungi isn't
Mhm.
like the most mainstream dream that parents want to hear, whatever the case may be. But
Yeah.
like to have a special interest like that, and then have
Mhm.
your family support you is like so
Yeah.
cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
for sure.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
I think I'm just dipping my toe in the water of my family beginning to appreciate what I'm doing because they're from
Nice.
like a different end of the universe. But um, I think that's really cool. That's awesome. That's awesome
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
sure.
thank you. Yeah. My parents are very
So
supportive, and I really appreciate that.
so not to like jump like from one subject to the
Let's
other, but
jump.
so so you had said something to me when you had sent me some media of yourself holding a particular
Yes.
uh, type of mushroom, and I said something about if that was something that was cultivated at the place you worked, and you
Mhm.
said that it was grown in your guys's myco chambers. What did you refer to
Yeah,
them as?
yeah, the fruiting chambers. So people always ask, are your mushrooms grown in a greenhouse? And what I like to say is, I mean, kind of, but it's like a mushroom, and I don't like to really say the word like warehouse. Like it's kind of like a building that you can control the climate, temperature, humidity, things like that. But there's no real windows that need to happen. Like sunlight isn't really something that mushrooms need. They're not photosynthetic, but they're photosensitive, is what I like to say. So, yeah, kind of a greenhouse, but it's mostly just like a little building that you can make. And so the farm has three different buildings. We're trying to build an additional one. We can't really keep up with the demand for mushrooms. Actually, I think a lot of mushroom farmers could agree is you sell out. Actually, a lot of people are starting to really enjoy the mushroom space, and a lot of restaurants also really like to have that on the menu, and people are so down for, farm to table things on their menu right
Sure.
now. So it's cool to have, our icon on the menu and say, hey, this is a local mushroom farm. We're a local, we're sourcing local materials, local food. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do too. But we don't have the mushrooms enough now to kind of provide for everybody. So we got to make more.
Yeah.
We got to make more mushroom space for more mushrooms.
I love it. I
Yeah,
love it. I mean, honestly, like, so, oh man, while you're talking, my brain's just like firing in all directions.
that's
But,
okay.
yeah, when I started like selling to restaurants,
Hmm.
in peak season, so we're out by Kennett Square, and Kennett Square, if you were to Google it, is actually referred to as the mushroom capital of the world,
Yes.
but
Yes.
but not for but honestly not for foraged mushrooms.
Oh.
It's one of the highest production points of mushrooms for warehouse cultivation,
Yeah.
like you're talking about.
Yep.
Um, and so one of the main clients that I used to sell to at a restaurant, at peak season, which is for them the fall, moving into the winter, um, their biggest, highest selling item is mushroom soup, and pretty much the main mushroom that they put into it is maitake.
Yep.
Um,
Oh, really?
but so the guy who I was selling to is the executive chef. He had five of us working separately for him,
Okay.
and was barely able to keep up. And he was telling me that he would go through in peak season 80 gallons of mushroom soup a day.
A day?
A day.
Wow. Okay. Yes.
So,
People
so
love mushroom soup.
to the end of what you're speaking, about Zephyr Farms, and production,
Mhm.
yeah, the demand is exponential,
Yeah.
um, in all different levels of the business, whether it be for buying from a supermarket to cook at home,
Mhm.
or even just going out to restaurants, like, you know, like people. Business science tells you that people will gravitate to certain things, and truffle mushrooms is a very big flavor add-on,
Yep.
seasoning slash and or base to like risottos and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So it's just something that's super popular in today's world,
Oh,
and
yeah.
yeah, it's really hard to keep up with.
Yeah.
But what's crazy is, and once again, my brain bouncing all around from the things that you have said, but you were talking about your trip to New Zealand,
Yes.
and it being an island continent and having this wildly diverse, fungi and plant life because of
Mhm.
everything else that's spread into the atmosphere and dropped down on the island, right?
Mhm.
So in this area in Kennett Square, uh, what's crazy is thinking about it in an almost like reverse format where, um, there are species that grow invasively here, that are introduced to the wildlife via the mushroom warehouses.
Oh
So
my
the mushroom,
gosh.
so the mushroom warehouses are growing these different species, indoor, completely, indoor cultivated, and they're pumping these exhaust fans out into the atmosphere, that specifically in our area has, created an influx of yellow oysters or golden
Yes.
oysters.
Yes.
And golden oysters are originally, to my understanding, native to Asia,
Mhm.
and were brought here. And
Yep.
so now, when you go out and walk in the woods in the spring slash summer in this area, there's golden oysters everywhere. And it's because the mushroom cultivation warehouses are pumping out spores into the atmosphere that are
Wow.
then dropping all over the forest.
Wow. That's
Like,
crazy. Yeah, yeah, my chat with Melissa, we actually were talking about that too, 'cause, she was talking about invasive species, in Wisconsin, and she's like, "But there's actually invasive mushrooms now," which is the golden oyster that you're talking about. So, yeah, that's wow, I didn't know it'd stem from that. It is isn't the biggest seller of those mushrooms, like, the manure-loving ones or, like, the Baby Bella, the Garrigus ones, or are they also doing culinary wood-loving mushrooms?
yeah, so the main, uh, output product of Kennett Square would definitely be like more like button mushrooms.
Yep.
The ones that are essentially, for the most part, grown in darkness in bunk beds and giant warehouses.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Um, so they grow tons of the white mushrooms, button mushrooms, criminy
Mhm.
mushrooms, whatever you want to call them,
Yep, yep.
here, that are then sold to supermarkets.
Yep.
Um, and it's kind of crazy because, like, as somebody who forages, has cultivated mushrooms at home, like in regards to culinaries, and then also goes out and shops supermarkets. It's like I go to supermarkets and I see the prepackaged maitake they have and stuff like that. I'm like, that's not it. That's not it.
No, I
Like
can't even look
it's
at
like
them.
it looks like shriveled, wet,
Yep.
um, like like pre pre-mortis body of what a maitake used to be. Like it's on its way out or something like that. But I don't know,
Yes.
like when you've gone out in the forest and you've found a maitake that's like 30 to 50 pounds, and then you
Yeah.
see the stuff that's in the it's in the supermarket, you're like, what is that?
Yeah, the
And don't get me wrong.
waterlogged.
And
Yes.
don't get me wrong, like tons like, everybody's got to start somewhere. But if you're cultivating at a commercial level, they should look a little better than that. And then what I noticed, what's even crazier yet, is that uh, have you down where you are? Have you heard of Wegmans?
Wegmans?
Wegmans.
That kinda
So
sounds familiar.
they're like a big supermarket chain,
Okay.
and I was actually just in there the other day, and me being the nerd I am, I'm like looking at these mushrooms, and then I
Yep.
see these really, actually pretty
Ooh.
king oysters sitting in a pack, and I was like, I might buy that pack just to clone them. I'm
That's
such a nerd,
awesome.
um,
That's
but I'm
awesome.
sitting there and I'm reading the labels, and I'm like looking at them, and they say cultivated in Canada, and I was
Hmm.
like, how is it that we have like so back to this is like full circle ideas, right?
Yeah.
Back to what you said about Zephyr Farms and not being able to keep up with demand. It's like, how is it that we are not doing well enough with the culinary mushroom industry in America that we're having to outsource from Canada?
Yeah,
And
it's
then like, are they getting like frozen and shipped along the way? Like, what the hell's happening? Is that why the
yeah.
maitake looks the way it does?
Yeah. I mean, you are closer than, like, if they shipped it to me. But yeah, I wonder if it's like, who you know, not what you know in this case. Also, they're like, "Hey, I can help you out. I have this, grocery store that would love mushrooms," and yeah, I don't know,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Hmm,
There's no way Canada is doing this better than we can. I mean, that's all
yeah.
I'm saying. If that's the case, we're not doing enough, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah,
We need to produce
exactly.
more mushrooms.
Yeah, that's
So,
interesting. Hmm,
yeah, crazy, crazy.
yeah, yeah.
So before you worked for this company,
Mhm.
uh, Zephyr, had you ever done like your own at-home cultivation of culinary?
Um, I've done a little bit. When I first met my partner, he actually, he would learn that I was super into mushrooms, and so we'd get the at-home mushroom kits that you can like just get online, and so that was kind of that first rendition. Grew some oysters, made some oyster tacos, super delicious. But yeah, that's some of the stuff that I've done. Um, yeah, not too much like at home. I also worked for another mushroom company, but we didn't really do cultivation. I wanted to kind of get them into that, but we did more of the foraging and kind of deliver to restaurants. We actually grew our own mushrooms um, in this like humidor type of chamber. So I worked at like this food hall called Keg and Case in St. Paul, Minnesota. And so that was kind of our main thing. It was kind of like a storefront, but we would partner with other foragers and bring in, forage products, plants, fungi, mushrooms, but then also would work with different cultivators. So we were kind of like the middle person in a way, but we would always get these awesome blocks and have like this amazing display. And everybody loved, how you grow mushrooms. It's kind of like vertical farming, but it was like a glass chamber, so you can kind of see all of the beautiful, colorations of the different oyster types and lion's mane and shiitake and everything like that. So that's kind of my main experience was kind of foraging or just kind of keeping up with like the cleaning and like how you have to sterilize everything and so things like that. Mhm.
It's very cool. It's funny because like I feel like you and I have different like beginnings and endings in the sense that like when I was growing up, I didn't have any exposure to any of this bullshit. I
Right.
just kind of like, I don't know, like, it's one of those things where like it's something that has grown to be a part of me in the past decade.
Mhm.
You seem like you've kind of had like your your toe in the water for bits and pieces of it throughout your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
College to present day.
Mhm.
Um, Whereas I'm an old man, so you know I'm 39.
Yeah.
I don't
I
know,
mean, I'm
but
30,
like I okay, okay.
so
Uh, but so like I didn't get into this type of stuff until I was your age. Like
right,
I think
right, right.
like think about you a decade from now and where you're gonna have taken things. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's gonna be fun actually, because like, there's so many discoveries and, like, what if we there's endless things that we might not even know exist until then.
for sure, for sure. I mean, yeah, the world of possibilities are endless, and you know, with the Earth, I feel like it can always have the ability to create something new. Shit, it's done it like 55 million times over the whole course
Yes.
of history. So, you
Mhm.
know, um,
Yes.
very cool. So, talk when, how do you continue to educate yourself? Like,
Mhm.
so I've seen you, and I guess a lot of it has to do with networking and kind of like gaining ideas and thoughts passed from people outside of yourself.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, that's
Because you've had
important.
some, because I mean, you've had some super super intriguing and interesting guests on your podcast,
Yeah.
um, and I feel like just even the act of doing the podcast alone probably helps you stay on the up and up and educate yourself to what's going on in the current community. But
Mhm.
like, how do you see yourself in regards to continuing to grow your knowledge and expand your wealth of knowledge that you provide the community?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. It started with, like, listening to other podcasts. So, before I started Flora Funga Podcast, I would kind of, listen to other plant-related or fungi-related, episodes, and I was like, "Oh, that's a really interesting topic." Sometimes I had, like, different questions than, like, they would ask, but it kinda started with, like, "Hey, I could possibly have them on if, like, one of my friends or people that I looked up to also had them on." But yeah, sometimes it's just like selfish topics that I'm interested in. So at Force to Fork, the that food hall that I was talking about, we would actually have a forager that would get sea beans for us, which is kind of like a protein sea vegetable, really salty, but tons of like mineral and actually protein in them. And I was just really interested in them. They're tasty, and I was like, "Oh, I wonder if I can, like, have somebody on about sea beans." And so that's kinda what stemmed with me making this, like, post and saying, "Who knows any expert in sea beans?" And, somebody actually tagged me in, King Tide's farm, and so he is actually in South Carolina, and I'm going to be doing, like, an in-person, interview with him just to, like, see a sea bean farm, and so it's, like, things like that where I, like, have an idea or somebody sends me to I now that I have a podcast for all these years, people are like, "Hey, have you ever looked into this?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's actually a good topic." So I love hearing from my listeners, my family, friends on like things that people are interested in. And that's why I keep my podcast really broad. Like it's anything with plants, anything with fungi. And so that's kind of why I had like people that do mushroom art, people with photography, people with, genome sequencing, so super nerdy stuff, and then like cooking mushrooms. So I like to have a wide variety of things, herbal healers. um yeah, think like I talk about consciousness now a lot because now I can kind of be like, well, mushrooms could be conscious, and so that's kind of somehow tied in that. But yeah, so keeping up with other people's podcasts, keeping up with all of the events that I can be a part of. So that's kind of how I got connected with Melissa and Dennis and Hamilton's Mushrooms. So I met all of these people at different events. And so if people are trying to like get their name out there or kind of meet more people, you obviously have more of a relatability when you have somebody face to face and you're like, hey, this is me, like I'm a real person. And you kind of give, you know, your little background, or you just say, hey, I really like what you're doing. And some people are like, oh yeah, I've actually heard of your podcast, things like that. So it's all about networking, getting out into the community. um, Something that I've also been doing recently is going to my monthly mushroom meetups here in Central Florida. And so tons of people are way more nerdy than me. Like somebody, you know, is focused all on making their own tinctures with reishi that they find, or the cordyceps. People have been finding that here in Florida, and so people like go down these rabbit holes of like different topics, and I'm like, whoa, that's super cool. I want to dig deeper into that. So yeah, it's really just like talking to people within the community and listening to your listeners on what they want to listen on is also a big thing too. So I like
That's a
to
good
I
call
like
out.
to branch out. Hmm.
It's a good call out. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to, kind of solicit to my listeners a little more about what they want to
Hmm.
hear and who they want to have on the show. 'Cause that's a good idea. I like that.
Yeah. Hmm.
I think for 2025, like for me personally, like for not the podcast, but for my business in itself, I think that's like something that I really have as a goal in my mind is that I want to
Hmm.
get out there in the community more in the sense that like always out there on social media, definitely put out tons of content, et cetera. But
Hmm.
there's never really that hand to hand contact where you're sitting amongst, like 50 other people who are also into this community and meeting people face to face and making those types of connections. So
Hmm.
definitely something I want to aspire to do in 2025 for sure is more of getting out to the mushroom festivals and stuff like that.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean you can do that on social media too. I took this like class on kind of like not marketing, but it was kind of like this online course. And she was saying, like, if you have a question about something, why don't you just ask your listeners or ask like the people that they're following? And so if you're like, hey, what's an interesting topic that you guys want to learn more about? Or if you're doing some sort of technique or um, doing something with like some sort of mushroom, you're like, you know, what niche topic are you guys interested in learning? And sometimes people are like, hey, I want to learn about this specific technique of autoclaving or something like that. I feel like getting really niche in topics like inspire people additional as well. So yeah, asking
Yeah, for
people
sure.
online what they
Yeah,
like.
yeah. I mean, a lot of our guests have been either SporeSwaps vendors themselves
Hmm.
or vendors who are just also vendors in the community.
Right.
And I think that there's still plenty of room to grow in regards to our subject matter material.
Hmm.
Uh, but it's hard to say sometimes, and I guess that's where really gauging your customer or sorry, your listener base comes into play.
Hmm.
Uh, is like we did an episode about ketamine therapy,
Okay.
and
Yes. Yep.
like so we wanted to kind of like branch out and make it so that it wasn't just us like talking to our own vendors and talking about what we do on Spore Swaps, like you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Um, and honestly, like for me, like those are some of the most introspective like episodes where I can talk to somebody and then think about what they're saying, and like the whole like ketamine therapy and that approach to resolving your own mental health status and stuff like that is something that I hadn't even thought about. You know what I mean?
Right.
Kind
Right.
of just like also expands your own personal repertoire of the things that you're knowledgeable about. So I knew nothing about it before then. And now I come out the other side and I have a very much clearer understanding of process, how you get in the room, and also like what you take from it. And I think that those episodes are the ones that I've enjoyed the most because we talk about mushrooms constantly personally, but
Right.
um,
Right.
so
Switch it up with some ketamine.
Yeah. Yeah,
I like it. No,
only
the
on the
therapy
weekends, but
is really cool, actually. I like that there's, like, so many different techniques that I mean, MDMA is even one that's, like, getting looked at and trying to be passed, for, I don't even know, like, depression and PTSD and, like, all of these things, couples therapy, things like that. So there's tons of new research being like, tons of new studies being done on microdosing in general. So it is kind of fun how it can heal multiple different people in different ways.
for sure.
Mhm.
So to give you guys some scope, I quick jot down like um, some recent episode topics that KK has talked about on her podcast with different guests.
Cool.
And so this is like a cool thing where it's like you run the spectrum of all different topics, but all kind of also related to the same thing at the same time.
Nice, yep.
Um, so relatable. So we got microdosing, mycelium, the plant slash fungal connection, the satire approach to psychedelics.
Mhm,
Do plants and fungi, do plants slash fungi think?
mhm.
Mushroom powders, decriminalizing nature, fungi and antibiotics. Like, how fun! I think it's so much fun. I feel like it covers such an awesome, like, wide array of topics that could capture anybody who's interested in this space. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Not just the person trying to grow at home, but somebody who's just trying to learn more. You know?
Right, right, and I try to, sprinkle in some plant stuff too. Recently, I feel like a lot of my episodes have been mushroom themed, but I've been listening to my listeners on how, people are always like, "More mushroom stuff," and I was like, "Yeah, but, like, plants too." So there's always that, like, battle of, "Okay, I think I've been doing a lot of, psychedelic, episodes now or doing a lot of mushroom stuff." So actually next week I'll be releasing my plant one with like fruits and what's like the difference between drupes and berries and how figs are pollinated by fig wasps, and so like there's this whole story that goes between that. So I actually interview another podcaster too, but he teaches like about biology, seed dispersal, and fruit. So that's something that I'm really, really interested in. Like, did you know that bananas are a berry? You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, I wonder what makes it that. So yeah, that's gonna be a
This
fun episode.
is interesting. I didn't
Hmm.
know that bananas were a berry.
See, right?
I just I just bought baby bananas for the first time. They're pretty damn
Yes.
good.
We
Little
love
guys.
baby bananas. Yes. Yeah, those, grow here in Florida, so I have a little
Well,
banana tree.
I was finding that it seemed like I only never ever needed like a half a banana.
Oh,
I was
okay.
just like wasting it for
There you
half.
go, problem solved.
So baby bananas for the win. What
Yeah,
can I
you can't
say?
really I mean, you can save a banana, but it gets kinda weird.
It's true. It's very true. Um, all right. So now that we've talked about your background, what you're currently doing, et cetera, tell me about like, so at what point did you decide that you wanted to take this from like a passion to being like a social media podcaster, blogger, like all the different like technology portions of it? Like why
Yeah.
and when did that all start?
Yeah, like from just recording on Zoom and posting it on YouTube, that kind of like that area where you kind of make more social media posts and like travel and stuff like that. Is that what you're kind of asking?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like, your plant love started as a child, then you
Mhm.
continued on through college, your degree and stuff like that. I guess like why did you decide to make that shift to like being somebody who hosted a podcast and did like, is your focus, I mean, a lot of your energy most
Mhm.
likely goes into your social media. Um,
Mhm.
Yeah, so, like, when did you decide, like, "I wanna share this with the world in this way?" You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, like, from the beginning, I was like, if I'm interested in this topic, I feel like other people would be interested, in this as well. Uh, Mushrooms are really trendy, but yeah, just kind of like sharing my knowledge, I feel like is what I wanted to do in the beginning. And my first few episodes, if you dare to go back to episode 1 through 5, I actually like recorded just me. Like it was me just kind of like going through like a whole spiel of like, what is a plant? What is a fungus? Like, why is that even important? And then even before I launched that episode, I actually created my Instagram account a few months before my launch of the podcast, and I already had somebody that wanted to be on. So that was actually my first interview. Is Sam the fungi with Central Texas Mycological Society, and we had a conversation for like 2.5 hours. And I was like, oh boy, is this my first like interview? Is this like what they're all gonna be like? But it was a really fun interview. So if you want to learn how to become a mushroom, listen to episode. I think it's 6. So so yeah,
Alright,
that was with
I'm
Sam
into it.
Sam the fungi, and yeah, so I had this job where I could listen to a lot of podcasts, and that's actually what I could do is like during COVID time. So I was like, I have so much time on my hands, and so I was like, I'm just gonna start this whole podcast while I'm kind of working because I just had a lot of downtime. And so yeah, from the beginning, it was like I wanted to share this. And um, but yeah, kind of what we were saying too with technology in the beginning, I just kind of recorded everything, put it on YouTube. I didn't really do much editing. But then with time and with money, I would invest into like a better microphone. I would have more of like a soundproofing area. Um, I kind of learned how to make a website and yeah, do more of the editing software. And then somebody else was saying, "Why don't you do more posts on social media?" They were like, "Why don't you make more video posts on Instagram?" And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. Like it takes a lot of work, but I want people to really enjoy the podcast, and I want people to get captured by these topics." So I was like, "You know what? Let's do it." So yeah, that's kind of how I got into more of the social media aspect. I just started really basic, and then with time, when I was able to even handle that, I kind of included those in there.
Nice,
And then
nice.
recently I made a TikTok. So yeah, on my show, you were saying, yeah, mostly on TikTok. And I was like, whoa, that's cool. I didn't really know that you would be mostly on TikTok. So I've started that now and I'm slowly gaining stuff on there. But if you can post on Instagram, you can post on all 8 of the options: LinkedIn, YouTube, uh, X, I guess, things like that.
Nice. Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, I'll put it like this, TikTok at this point is the one who's giving me the least shit,
Mhm.
and
Nice. Yep.
and hasn't community violated me like 19 times, so, um,
Yeah, that's a lot.
I don't know what it is, but, like, it's something about that social media integration allows us to fly under the radar with what we're
Mhm.
trying to accomplish, and share. Uh, but no, that's cool to hear how it kinda, like, just naturally snowballed from, like, pretty much, like, what are how-to kind of esque videos,
Yeah.
to then to what it is today, because that's,
Mhm.
yeah, impressive. So,
Thank you.
you have had some pretty awesome, influential guests on
Yeah.
your podcast, and as a podcaster myself, I wonder in my own head, like, how do you go about finding the majority of your guests? Do the majority of your guests find you, or
Right.
like how do you seek out new material, new people?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Let
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, yeah, okay, I'll tell you my secret. Uh, so most of it is kind of like figuring out who would be right for the topics, at hand, but I think I would say the beginning was just knowing a friend that knew somebody. So my first, I guess you'd call influential guest would be Hernan Castro with Desert Alchemist. And my friend actually knew him because they both live in Tucson. And so she was like, "Hey, I know that you have this podcast. I actually just met this awesome mycologist here in Arizona. Let me get in contact with you guys." And so that really stemmed from him coming on. He would send me awesome samples, all these like cool merch shirts. And I was like, whoa, am I like important enough that somebody's like sending me like stuff of theirs and doing an unboxing? And then I'm always like, hey, who would you recommend to be on the podcast? He was like, oh, I have this friend, Alan Rockefeller. And I was just like, okay. Like, if you don't know Alan, he's kind of the top person alongside of obviously Paul Stamets is kind of like the godfather, the wisdom, the old mushroom wisdom. But then Alan is kind of like IDing psilocybe species, DNA barcoding mushrooms. So he's kind of like somehow he just knows all of these species and genus just by looking at them. And I'm just like, I don't know how you get there. You're just a genius. And then that kind of stems from other people like, hey, I know this friend and I think you guys would mesh. So that's really where it started. In the beginning, obviously, I had to reach out to all of my people and be like, please come on. And I kind of like learned how to adjust my emails, or calling them is probably a good bet too. Pretty direct, because people obviously don't always just answer the forms online. So things like that, reaching out to them on social media. And then now that I'm kind of an established podcast, people are starting to reach out to me. There's tons of third party companies that kind of connect me with other guests. So they're like, hey, my person that I'm working with would be great on your podcast. Here's their media kit. Look through them and see if they'd be a right fit. So then that's when I kind of have discovery calls and see if it's a good vibe or not. So yeah, actually a lot of people have been reaching out to me. And then again at these events that I was talking about, kind of introducing myself and being like, hey, I really like what you do. A good key or tactic that I would recommend is finding like a niche topic that they probably don't talk too much about. Like I'm sure Alan loves talking about, psilocybe species, but, you can invite him on to talk about other things. So that's kind of what I did with William Padilla Brown. He's known for like truffles and mushrooms and stuff, but I also learned that he does his own spirulina and grows his own like spirulina farm. So that's kind of like an algae species that you can eat as a supplement. And so I had him on for that, and I just thought that was a different take than other people would approach him with. And so that's kind of what I want to do with Paul Stamets. I want to talk about like mushrooms in space and how he's trying to do something like that. So Telluride this year, I'm gonna try to introduce myself, make that connection. So we're gonna manifest that. That's my big dog. I'm trying to just get in there and introduce myself. So have
got a
confidence.
goal
You got this.
for sure. So wait, have you already had Alan on your show?
Mm-hmm.
Well, shit.
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
Like,
a year or two ago. And then so yeah, I've actually hung out with them multiple times at different festivals and things, and then met Mandy. And yeah, so then I had her on. So really just like, leads to other things. And then somebody was recommending Gordon, Dr. Gordon Walker. And so I had him on too. And so that was just really cool. So yeah, you kind of like meet somebody and then they're like, hey, you've had this person on, maybe this person would do it. And so I kind of just try to bridge all the gaps and meet all the friends. And a lot of these people are at different mushroom festivals. So you can kind of go to different ones. And so yeah, that's kind of
nice. I
Mhm.
So Alan's like, I mean, for me, that would be like pretty much like pinnacle guest to have on my
Yeah.
show.
Okay, cool.
I Yeah, very much know about Alan. I
Mhm.
share his posts to SporeSwaps quite often because he posts a lot of good educational material.
Yes, very
Actually,
educational.
yeah, actually, one was today that I shared one of his posts to
Okay.
SporeSwaps because he just did a post today about verifying uh, crosses between Psilocybe natalensis and Psilocybe cubensis.
Okay.
So pretty much he gets sent samples, he gets sent pictures, and he runs the back end data sequencing of the samples like you talked about.
Mhm. Yep,
Um,
by Naturalist and other places, I'm guessing too.
yeah, yeah. So there's been all these most recent changes. I don't know if you've heard the word, but
Oh, what's
um,
the word?
so so there's this whole like confusion that's been happening in our community for a bit now about a psilocybe sample that was supposed to come from South Africa. Um,
Oh, yeah.
and yeah, so it's been floating around our community for some time now, and it's referred to as psilocybe natalensis. But
Okay.
um, most recently, after back-end sequencing natalensis in our community, it was actually found to differ from the psilocybe that was found in South Africa originally.
Mhm.
Um, so our vendors and our community have recently gone through this change where we had to essentially change the name of all the natalensis products that we carried to Ochreo centrata.
Oh my gosh.
And
Yep. I love
so
it.
yeah, so the real psilocybe natalensis from South Africa has now been brought to our community as of a couple months ago, or like
Mm.
I don't know, 6 9 months ago. Um, but it's crazy because we all had these products in our store that held the name psilocybe natalensis that we then had to go through and change to psilocybe centrata
Okay.
because it was found to not be the real natalensis.
Oh.
Um, so, anyways,
Yeah.
long story very long story very short. Uh, Alan just shared an article or video formatting today of how he verifies if a
Mm.
cross is successful, like that from cross inter interspecies crosses.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
um, to see if when somebody was sitting there saying essentially like that they crossed psilocybe cubensis with psilocybe natalensis, like is it a true cross
Got it.
or is it just one kind of like representing the expression of another? Anyways,
Mhm. Mhm.
I find Alan to be indefinitely interesting and would love to have
Yes.
him on my show. What's
Yes.
funny is just like one of my first guests, though, I kind of sometimes get that feeling like if I'm sitting in a conversation with this person who's so immensely more intelligent than I am I just going to sound like an idiot?
No.
Or-
No. I think he's all about, like, education, and he just really cares about the community, and he's just, like he's such a nice guy. Even off, like, camera and everything, he's just, like, so helpful, so funny, like, so weird and so awesome at the same time. And yeah, like you were saying, genius. Like, I'm just like, how do you memorize all of these, like, species and how to decipher them? One of my favorite pairings is Joey from Crime Pays but Botany Doesn't. Him and Alan went to New Zealand, and they were just finding psilocybe species in like your common gardening stores, and so they were just like filming at these stores and just like pointing out what mushrooms are in these like plant containers. And I was just like, this is so fun. It's just like
yeah,
education. You got the plant guy, you got the mushroom guy. Together, it's just a like yeah, Joey just knows like all of the plant species. He also is starting to get more into mushrooms and you know hanging out with Alan, so he gets all of the information that way. So they're a fun pair together. Hmm.
I feel like a lot of people who are like kind of like we'll call them high-ranking educators, members of the community, whatever the
Hmm.
case may be. Um, classically educated, but the majority of their education came after. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like you learn like the basis when you go to school and you get that degree, et
yep.
cetera. But that's just like it's like the bottom of the mountain. You know what I
Y
mean?
yeah, and most people don't even go to school for like, all most of my colleges, they don't really offer that because I couldn't even do that when I was in school. They had plants and they had soil, and I was like, "Well, kind of, but, like, neither." And so, yeah, most people, you don't really go to school for mycology. Like, Alan, in my episode, he starts with, "Yeah, I used to, um" how did he put it? He like worked for NASA with like cyber security and he's like got bored of that, wanted to do mushrooms. And I was just like, I love how you went from like that to like studying mushrooms. So and same with, like William, like he just was self-taught. All these people are just have such a passion for mushrooms and mycology that they just like stick to it and learn it all themselves, which I think is even more impressive.
Yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. I mean, myself included, like my story. I mean, I was in the foraging world for a decade before I ever started cultivating. I never
Mhm.
even grew a mushroom before 5 years ago.
Right,
I mean,
right.
but doesn't really matter. It really just depends on how deep you're willing to take that dive
Mhm.
into just learning. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mhm.
All right. So since you started, I mean, I think that I mean, I won't be so pretentious as to say he was your favorite, but top three guests.
Okay,
I mean, I'm
okay.
assuming I'm assuming Alan probably falls somewhere in there, but
Yeah, yeah, I know, it's really hard to pick top because it's always, like, depends on, like, the vibe that we have or, like, the conversations, but top ones that I feel like I really vibed with, obviously, Melissa Kettleson, if you don't know who she is, she's just a really knowledgeable person connecting plants, fungi, she even talks about, like, insects, soil, food web, so that's just, like, a really fun chat that we have. I just kinda released that one. Hamilton's mushrooms was also like unexpectedly so educational because we kind of look behind the curtains of how mushroom powders are made and I feel like I just like learned all of these like secrets that they just kind of do with the mushroom products, like what concentration, things like that. So that was a really interesting one. Myco Love, with Shane was another good one where he was just, like, so knowledgeable about so many different things, and so we cover, like, your ultimate mushroom stack that you could use on a daily basis. Um, Dennis Walker obviously is so funny. So he's got the mushroom satire. So he does a lot of social media posts, and so he's a really fun person too. And yeah, Alan obviously is just also very interesting. I feel like I learned so much about all of my guests, but especially like the nerdy ones where I'm like I don't even know half the time what we're talking about, but like I'm down to learn about it. And so I think those are kind of my top ones where I don't really expect to, learn so much in such detail. And I really
yeah.
appreciate when people can speak really well also. So that's another like positive if you get a lot of not like more popular guests, but people that do a lot of public speaking, it's like wow, they're really perfectly put and the editing's great. It's like really easy to edit, some of these episodes because I'm like, wow, you didn't even say like once. And I'm just like, how do you've just like perfected and you just kind of have a good spoken word to you. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
for
probably
sure.
some of them. Another one I want to shout out though is Tyler Hacking. I haven't even released his episode yet, but we talk about morels and all of these studies. He's just doing so much research with all these different things, and he's actually really good friends with Alan and Maddie. So I just Mandy, and so yeah, it was just that was a really fun one just because I felt like we were friends and we were just kind of catching up. And so the vibe was cool and learned a lot, like so much. I learned so much. So that's an episode coming soon. Mhm.
Nice, nice. Well, so the one guy you talked about, he so I think it's interesting because you go from like top tier, almost like educators
Mhm.
and discoverers, to the guy who I forget what you said his name was just now, but um, didn't he make like a social media presence with almost like the like sensory qualities of mushrooms, like touching mushrooms and smashing
Oh,
mushrooms and
yes. Yes, yeah, that is, Doctor whoa, how did I just forget? Walker, Gordon. Gordon. Yeah, wow, I wanna say Fantastic Fungi, but it's Fascinated by Fungi, that's his username on there. He does
yeah,
the Tap Tap Crunch, one, so that was another interesting conversation that I had because I kinda picked his brain about, social media and kind of, how he got so popular, like, he's got, like, what, millions of followers on TikTok or something, and his top, content is literally just, like, touching mushrooms and, like, feeling them and making like mushroom sounds with them. And he was like, I don't know, people like it. And now it's just like a whole thing that he calls tap tap crunch. So that's that's like a thing that he was like, I
well,
wasn't the first person to do it, but yeah, so that was a really, really interesting conversation too. Sorry for
I mean,
butchering his name. I feel terrible.
I mean, like sounds of mushrooms is something in itself that I can't say that I've ever heard somebody refer to, like
Yeah,
sounds of mushrooms.
yeah. I think he did it once and it just blew up and, he was saying if you don't put any words on, like, the video itself, it gets pushed to a broader audience, so if you have, English lettering, typing, things on there, then it's gonna go to just, like, Americas, but if you have, like, no words on there or talking of a specific language, it actually reaches out to more people. So he was like, honestly, I kind of like to do that because then I get a broader audience and, Asia loves mushrooms. So he's like, I get a lot of like, Asian culture watching my videos, kind of audience around the world. So that was like a little tip that I learned from him. I was like, oh, that makes sense. Hmm.
Honestly, it's something like I would never even think of.
Right. Right.
That, that, you know, attaching the English language to what we're doing actually is a limiting thing. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
exactly.
Um,
Mhm.
so interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And like in his videos, like you don't, I think, isn't it just like pretty much you see like his hands slash
mhm.
fingertips? Like there's no like person that's like the feature in these videos. It's just
That's a
like
good point.
somebody like rubbing a
Yeah, they're
mushroom and then like
they're
tapping it,
sometimes a
whatever.
little sexual, and I think that's why people like it because it's fun, and he has his own, like, Only Fungi page, we actually cover that too of, like, OnlyFans, but it's only fungi, and so it's just, like, really interesting photos of different mushrooms looking like other
Oh,
things, so yeah, that was a really fun conversation, and yeah, so you learn something
I
new.
think it's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. Maybe
yeah.
my next adventure is finding sexuality in mushrooms. Let's go.
Some mushroom shapes are a little phallic, and I think that's what makes it funny, and then yeah, so you gotta try it all, see what clicks.
For sure, for sure. Oh, well, I mean, he hit the nail on the head, so obviously it clicks.
Yeah, yep, absolutely, so and I think more he was saying that he really enjoys doing, like, cooking videos and, like, showcasing because he's also, like, a chef and, did a lot of brewing, and people are like, "We don't wanna see that." It's just like, "Okay." Like, I think somebody was like, "We don't care about your cooking," and he was like, "But I care, so I'm still gonna do my posts, but you guys can still have your posts that you like." So, he's listening to his
Exactly.
listeners, to his
Yes.
following.
Very
Yeah, super
important,
funny.
important.
Mhm.
So, alright, so from a child, learning plants with your mom, going to college for, biology,
Mhm.
taking it to the next level, love for foraging. What's next for KK and the Flora Funga Podcast? Like,
Yeah.
where do you see this going next? Do you see yourself sticking to episode format, doing hundreds of episodes? Like, what?
Right.
How do you see your future?
Yeah, good question. Well, I'm hoping that I turn this into a full-time job where I can actually, pay the bills with. And I think that would start with doing more in-person interviews. I think a lot of people obviously like to see better video quality. I've actually changed using my laptop camera to now using my GoPro. And so there's just like little tweaks like that. But yeah, something that I want to do is kind of like a documentary format or like kind of a TV show format called Nerdy Jobs, where I travel around and try different jobs. Kind of around plant biology, plants, environmental conservation, mycology. And I just kind of try it out for a weekend. So if you've heard of Dirty Jobs, it's kind of like a spin-off of that, but with the nerdy job. So trying out different things like that. So that's where the sea bean farm is coming into play. That's kind of where I'm actually going to do my pilot episode with Zephyr Gill's mushroom farm. So that's kind of what I'm hopefully going toward. I can't always make it around the world. I do a lot of different interviews from different countries and trying to get into all of the countries. I think I was counting like 80 something countries left to kind of get into. So I was looking at some of my stats and I'm like, how can I get into some of these areas? So kind of thinking like topics that wise and seeing, where I can go to next. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to gear toward is do more events, be maybe more of like a presenter. So that's kind of what I've been looking forward to with Tallyride. I believe I'm going to be doing intro to lichen, because it's a beginning topic too. Not a lot of people know what lichen is and why that's even important. And people are like, "What is that? Is that even a plant, mushroom?" Well, stay tuned for that. Hmm.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, some more in-person stuff. Definitely, nerdy jobs is hopefully what I'm manifesting nowadays.
Gotcha. I don't know.
Hmm.
My wheels are spinning, thinking about what you're currently doing, what you're trying to be doing, where your future focus lies,
Yes, yeah.
and I, I could see you doing interviews
Hmm.
slash like first person documentary footage of these mushroom events, like doing
Yeah.
interviews on site all weekend long with
Yep.
people who like
Yep.
are already there. That's like plug and play.
Yeah, yep. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now. I think, before we started recording, I was saying I was working on my documentary. So the past 2 years, I've been invited out to Olympic Peninsula Fungi Festival in Washington. That's actually where I first met Alan at that mushroom festival. But yeah, they've invited me to kind of film a documentary for them. So I did that last year, and I'm working on the one for from 2024. So that was out in Washington in October. So I'm trying to release that obviously before this year's Mushroom Festival. So yeah, hopefully that's kind of what I'm working on next is putting together that documentary, but it's a lot of work, like doing a lot of the filming and things like that. So I do love doing the documentaries, but I wish I could like hire somebody to put the media together. Like it's fun making the content and kind of thinking about, the plot and like how it goes together, but it's a lot of video editing. Like that takes up a lot of work, especially if I'm trying to do my episodes at the same time. So that's kind of what I'm struggling with right now is trying to like balance doing these episodes every week and then also at the same time working on my documentary. So I'm like trying to still put them in order and perfect it. You know how it is.
Yep,
Mhm.
you got a lot on your plate
I
and a
do.
normal gig and all these other things that you do.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
there's no extra time, and we
Yes.
all we all kind of sometimes wish there could be more time in the day because
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Yeah, honestly, so like I'm a musician and uh a long time ago I tried to take a dive into recording, and what I found is that with recording, unless you're doing with two people at least, it's not enjoyable
Mm.
because you have to go back and forth between playing and hitting record and stop on your computer, and
Oh.
playing and going, hitting and record and stopping computer, and then splicing everything a little bit back because you just walked from your equipment over to pressing stop.
Yes.
And it's just like, what I found was I was like, I'm a musician.
Just
I'm
let me
not a
play.
studio engineer. Not a studio engineer, and I just wanted to play music. So like for someone like you, who enjoys talking to people, who enjoys socializing, who enjoys educating, who enjoys all these things that involve you talking, like that's probably definitely the harder piece for sure. It's like
Mhm.
if you had somebody to help you with your editing and social media and all these other things
Yep,
that just
that
kind of like
sounds
took away from the time that you'd be like, yeah,
yep.
exactly. Yeah,
No, yeah, it's
you
it's
know,
a it's a good point, and that's actually why, I love my partner. Shout out to Kevin. He's been so helpful with, like, helping me, invest in mics when I first started out, just kinda supporting me through all these years. I like to call him my technical advisor because he's all about the technology, and so right now he's, like, building me a camera that we actually took out to the Olympic Peninsula Fungi Fest, and we took some video with his camera, and so, yeah, he's been, like, putting together, like, a software to program all these buttons, and I'm just like, "That's a you thing." So, yeah, he's been helping me with some of the, like, directing, and he's like, "Come on, we gotta do another take," and I'm like, "No, I don't wanna do it." So, yeah, he's been very helpful with helping me kinda, put things together, especially on the, technical side of things, so I couldn't do any of this without him.
well,
Mhm.
having a strong support system and somebody who believes in you
Yes.
and can help you advance your life and what you're trying to accomplish is it makes
Yes.
all the difference. So that's
Yes.
awesome.
Mhm.
Glad you have that.
Mhm.
Well, I gotta say, it's been awesome having you on.
Thank you.
I've truly enjoyed hearing your story and
Thank
about your
you.
business and hearing about your guests.
Yeah,
And honestly, like it gives me, you know, down the road goals to
yeah,
aspire to.
good. He's
And
inspired a little bit?
yeah,
Cool.
yeah, I love talking to people who inspire me.
Mhm.
And that's just the thing is, inspiration does come from other people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mhm.
And I love being inspired by others. So
Yes, thank
thank you
you.
so much.
Yes, thank
It
you. Thank you for having me on. This
absolutely,
is awesome,
absolutely.
and I really enjoyed talking to you too.
For sure. So if any of you guys don't know, I just did an episode on KK's podcast, and now
Yes.
she's on my podcast. So we have a little bit of cross informational material and have kind of tapped into each other's stories and what each other are getting into. So uh, check out her podcast, Flora Funga Podcast.
Yes.
KK, she's an awesome host.
Thank you.
She has some really really great material on her site, so
Thank
check it
you.
out. Um, Thank you so much for being here, and thank you
Yes.
so much everybody for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on again, and yeah, go watch the one that we just did because he has some good information too.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Thank you so much, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
Absolutely, let's do it. Thanks.
All right, I'll talk to you soon. Peace.
See ya.